Today, we're taking a look at what's happening in gaming and tech news. Let's get to it. In the dehumanizing employment environment that is the modern video game industry, Microsoft is doing its part to make things worse by making more massive cuts to the Xbox division. This time, it's hitting studios that came with the Bethesda purchase. According to a report over at IGN, Microsoft has closed Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, and Alpha Dog Games. Roundhouse Studios will be absorbed by ZeniMax Online Studios. Microsoft isn't saying how many staff will lose their jobs, but based on the number of studios mentioned, it's hard to imagine that it's not going to be a significant number. Matt Booty, the head of Xbox Game Studios, sent an email to employees, and if you read between the lines, he said that this was about cost savings for Microsoft, and was likely a move to bump up new versions of Fallout and Elder Scrolls to the top of the development queue. A couple of lines from the email stood out to support our thoughts here. First, he said, "These changes are grounded in prioritizing high-impact titles and further investing in Bethesda's portfolio of blockbuster games. And to double down on these franchises and invest to build new ones requires us to look across the business to identify the opportunities that are best positioned for success. This reprioritization of titles and resources means a few teams will be realigned to others. And we are making these tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment in other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games." There's been speculation since the Bethesda acquisition that there would be a large number of layoffs at some point, since that's almost always a given after mergers. But the deal closed 3 years ago, so it's hard to tie these layoffs and closures to the acquisition, but that delay could be a result of having games ready to launch, so there could have been a bit of wait and see with some of those titles. Regardless, we can't properly put into words how much this sucks to see happen. One of the game industry's secrets that's becoming less and less of a secret as we see more layoffs and the same people at the top being shuffled around throughout all of this is that there's a high degree of it's not what you know, but who you know. And unless you know the right person, you're just a number on a badge and run the risk of becoming a statistic by way of job cuts. In these cases, it doesn't matter how good you are at your job. Rather, it's about people holding on to what power they have by way of keeping people they like and know around as others get cut. In the game industry, this is a tale as old as time, and if you look close enough and you look back far enough, you'll see the same patterns and the same players doing the same thing year over year. The game industry is broken when it comes to companies treating employees with the dignity that they deserve, and these layoffs are more evidence of that. Our hearts go out to everyone affected by this. Speaking of people affected by the layoffs, the creative director of Arcane Leon, Dinga Bataba, took to Twitter to air his frustrations, and we think his series of posts deserve their own section here, because you don't have to look hard to see that his venting is directed towards corporate executives who make these cold, dehumanizing decisions to ruthlessly cut the jobs of hundreds or even thousands of good people from working in an industry that they love, all because shareholders need to see bars go up and to the right on the next earnings call. We're not going to read the whole thing here, but we do want to call a few parts out. From the post, this is absolutely terrible. Permission to be human. To any executive reading this, friendly reminder that video games are an entertainment cultural industry, and your business as a corporation is to take care of your artists, entertainers, and help them create value for you. Our take on this is that he's speaking to what we mentioned just a minute ago. Layoffs like this reek of making moves to keep shareholders happy. Employees are ultimately the ones who create value at a company. But in the corporate world, as far as shareholders are concerned, it's companies who create value, not people, which is a notion that executives pander to when they cut staff. He goes on to say, "Don't throw us into gold fever gambits. Don't use us as strawmen for miscalculation, blind spots. Don't make our work environments Darwinist jungles. You say we make you proud when we make a good game. Make us proud when times are tough. We know you can. We've seen it before." This is referencing how executives' poor decision-making often leads to bad situations, like, say, employees getting laid off. At most tech companies, it was the employees who were concerned about the overstaffing during COVID, but the executives continued on with their plans, because gaming numbers were historic at the time. It was the employees who were let go when those numbers went back down, not the executives who made the gold fever gambit. Also, the comment about work environments being Darwinist jungles is likely a reference to how Microsoft has continued to force workers into open-spaced cubicle farms over the years, while they continue to roll back work-from-home options. We'll leave the rest of his post up to you for interpretation, so please take the time to read what he has to say, because his post is yet another tale of an industry that's increasingly hostile towards what it means to be human, as it continues to dehumanize its workforce over and over again. And in kinda sorta related news, or maybe just bad timing, Kotaku published an article that questions Phil Spencer's success since he became the leader of all things gaming at Microsoft. Among the criticisms in the article, they point out that under Phil's leadership, the team has seen more layoffs, more studio closures, fewer first-party game releases, and fewer console sales than at any point in the history of the Xbox team. On one hand, under Phil's leadership, Microsoft has become one of the world's largest game publishers and has launched the most successful game subscription service to date and helped navigate the largest mergers in the history of the game industry. From a purely corporate perspective, these are huge wins, but in a way, that's the problem, because these concepts haven't directly translated to building products that gamers want. They're great for talking to shareholders, but out of touch when talking to gamers. Because, on the other hand, Xbox has been struggling to keep up with Sony and Nintendo for almost 2 hardware generations now when it comes to console sales, and their first-party game portfolio has seen some good, but only a few great games released. Some of their biggest franchises have almost stagnated, and their presence on PC is a broken, bare minimum effort. And talk of wanting to give the teams the creative platform to go and push their ability, push their aspirations, has been replaced with making these tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment in other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games, which is cold corporate speak for creating value for the shareholders by way of laying people off. And while all this is happening, Xbox fans have been waiting for Xbox Gaming's big comeback, which seems like it's been about 6 months away for 5 years now. In the interest of being fair, the rest of the Xbox leadership team should be part of this conversation. Matt Booty and Sarah Bond have been right by Phil's side, on stage and in video, and have been part of the executive strategy team for years now. And sure, Phil is probably the one who makes the final go, no-go decisions, but in the scope of a 10-year brand performance discussion, both Sarah and Matt absolutely need to be part of the conversation, because Sarah has been there for 7 years and Matt has been there for all 10. I've seen both in quite a few videos and online events, and they both strike me as being even more corporate and less connected to gaming culture than Phil is. So if we're going to do deep dive pieces like the one here at Kotaku, we should do one on the entire leadership team over there at Xbox, because they've all been part of the executive strategy team there for almost as long as Phil has. You should give the article a read because it covers a lot of ground and links to quite a few other pieces that add context to some of their points and callouts. After 10 years at the helm, Xbox is in 3rd place in console sales, last place in the PC gaming space, and has a stagnant first-party game portfolio. It seems like the only thing they lead the industry in at this point is layoffs. Part of the fallout from Microsoft's studio closure announcements was the news that all work on Redfall was ending. Since launch, Redfall has been a bit of a punching bag on YouTube and elsewhere online, and to be fair, the game launched in a fairly broken state. The biggest issues were terrible performance and terrible AI, and there's no sugarcoating this. Both were pretty bad. But here's the thing, we've seen all the hot takes about how bad the game was at launch, but since then, Redfall has seen several updates, and while they're not enough to move the game into great status, they've definitely pushed it into solid 7 out of 10 territory. While the updates haven't solved some of the game's core issues, they've been addressed to the point where you're not constantly dealing with them, and this has allowed the other aspects of the game to breathe a little. The setting and atmosphere of the game are fantastic. The story and environmental storytelling are surprisingly interesting to uncover at times, and both have a top-shelf B-movie feel to them. These things aren't enough to carry the entire game, but they could be if you adjust your expectations accordingly. This is all to say that with the updates in place, we're allowed to focus on the rest of the game, and it's not all bad. There was a development roadmap that included the long-promised Hero Pass, which would have brought 2 new characters to the game. But part of the studio closure announcement was that Microsoft was shutting down all development of the game. And while based on the game's history, this isn't all that surprising, it does raise a few questions. The game launched with an unpopular always-online requirement, even though it had a single-player mode. And a while back, game director Harvey Smith said that they're working to address this in the future. But this closure seems to mean that Redfall will likely never get an offline mode, which is unfortunate where game preservation is concerned. And it appears that this comes as a shock to people who were working on Redfall, because there was another update scheduled for this May that they were actively working on. The other big question is what will happen to the people who purchased the Bite Back Edition, which was supposed to include the now cancelled Hero Pass. For now, it seems like this group of gamers will receive some form of credit, and they left a link for this in their closure announcement. So, while we're not too surprised that work on Redfall was cancelled, we're sad to see the end of the road so soon. Because once performance and AI issues were mostly addressed, the setting and environmental storytelling and atmosphere in the game ended up being pretty good, but not quite great. And what the hell, let's wrap this up with another Microsoft story. It's an all-Microsoft news day. In a weird bit of white knighting, former Microsoft and Blizzard executive Mike Ibarra came to Phil Spencer's defense online after the layoff and closure announcements. From the post, I see a lot of shots at Phil over today's Xbox announcements. I get it, but knowing him as a human, I know this hurts him as much as anyone else. I can't speak for all the leadership there, but I do know him, and I do know what he's likely going through. I'm not trying to defend the decisions. I think we all get ourselves into situations that are tough and unexpected. Certainly I have. It's part of the job, as is the accountability for the outcomes. But he's a good human, and he cares deeply for the creative process and developers. That's my first-hand experience in working closely with him for 8+ years and knowing him for 24+. Look, we get what he's saying, but as Mike puts it, while part of the job is accountability for the outcomes, at the end of the day, Phil is a multimillionaire who could step away from the industry at any point he chooses and never have to worry about finances again, because getting giant bonuses and having a salary larger than most homes cost is also part of the job. And the same can't be said about the people below him who have or are about to lose their jobs. Not everyone in the tech industry is rich. Once the layoffs hit, a good number of the people affected are going to be worried about paying rent and putting food on the table, because unfortunately for them, part of their job is that they have to pay the consequences for poor executive decisions, and as Dinga put it, gold fever gambits that prioritized trend chasing at the expense of downstream employee job security. I'll end this with a reply to Mike from Alana Pierce. Mike, I have a lot of fondness for Phil, and don't doubt he's incredibly bummed about this, but CEOs can handle some shots amidst people having their lives destroyed. Your sympathetic posts should solely be directed at those who've lost their jobs. And that about wraps things up. Please like this video if you found it useful, and subscribe to our channel if you want more content like this. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and we'll chat again soon.